No one expected the First Lady and the Congresswoman to collide that night, but when they did, the world stopped breathing. The ballroom shimmered with gold light and false laughter. Crystal glasses clinked to polished rhythm as Washington's elite performed their nightly theater of grace. The air smelled of money and ambition, too sweet, too heavy. At the center of it all, Melania Trump glided through the crowd, her diamond bracelet catching every camera flash like a weapon. Every smile was measured, every gesture deliberate. She had perfected the art of looking untouchable. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett stood in quiet contrast. No designer armor, no entourage, just a sharp black dress, eyes that didn't flinch, and the calm of a woman who'd fought her way into rooms like this. She wasn't born into power, and she clawed her way up through it. And that difference, though unspoken, hummed between them like static. The cameras turned. A reporter from a gossip outlet stepped forward, too eager, too aware of the tension in the air. "Mrs. Trump, Congresswoman," he began, his grin almost cruel, "you both represent very different versions of American womanhood. What do you think is more important, image or respect?" The question sliced through the music. Heads turned. Melania's lips curved into the kind of smile that ends conversations. "Both," she said softly. "But respect must be earned, and image reflects who we are inside." It was elegant, rehearsed, and aimed. The crowd chuckled under their breath. Phones lifted. Crockett's eyes narrowed just slightly, as if measuring the moment, deciding what kind of night this would become. For a second, she said nothing. She could have laughed it off, played the game like everyone else. But that wasn't Jasmine Crockett. She looked at Melania, steady, then at the crowd, the polished, privileged faces waiting to see if she'd bow. Her voice, when it came, was low, even, almost kind. But every word carried heat. "Funny," she said. "Some people wear image like perfume. But respect, that's what you leave behind when the cameras stop flashing." The laughter died instantly. The music faltered, and what Jasmine said next wasn't planned, but it changed the tone of the entire night. The morning after, Washington woke to headlines that burned hotter than the ballroom lights. Melania's subtle jab steals the night. Crockett's calm cuts deeper than words. Cable panels replayed the clip in slow motion. The poised First Lady, the unbothered Congresswoman, and that single line about perfume and respect. It was barely a sentence, yet it struck a national nerve. Because behind those few words, Americans saw something bigger than a gala exchange. They saw two faces of power colliding under the same chandelier. Melania represented the old model. Silence dressed as grace. The kind of elegance that demands distance, that speaks softly and expects obedience in return. Her image had always been her weapon, polished, untouchable, beyond question. Crockett was everything that image tried to suppress. Loud when necessary, unfiltered when cornered, and unashamedly real. She didn't fit the Washington mold, and that was exactly why people watched. By noon, the internet had taken sides. On one screen, conservative commentators praised Melania's class and restraint. On another, progressive creators dissected the power dynamic frame by frame. TikTok clips looped the moment with captions like, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard." Crockett Clapback trended first. Melania moment tried to catch up but fizzled within hours. Twitter, or what was left of it, became a battlefield of tone and truth. Some said Crockett was disrespectful, others called it the most dignified rebuttal they'd ever seen. Late-night hosts joked that Melania tried to be best, but Crockett was best. But beneath the laughter and memes, something deeper was unraveling. The encounter had tapped into a raw national question. What is dignity in America now? Is it in the posture or in the principle? In the curated silence of privilege or in the courage to speak uncomfortable truth? Editorials poured in. A New York Times op-ed called it the return of real. Meanwhile, a conservative blog accused Crockett of disrespecting tradition. But Crockett wasn't aiming to fit into tradition. She was redefining it. For years, Washington rewarded the performance of respect, smiling through insult, applauding while being ignored. Crockett's calm defiance had shattered that illusion in a single breath. It wasn't a debate between two women. It was a mirror held up to a nation addicted to appearances. In the viral storm, one clip stood out. A cell phone video from someone in the back of the ballroom, shaky, grainy, unfiltered. It captured Crockett's steady face right after she spoke, and the flicker in Melania's eyes, surprise, maybe even fear. That single moment told a story that words couldn't, because Crockett didn't just speak truth to power. She reminded power it could bleed. By sunset, everyone in D.C. had an opinion, but only one question mattered. Would the First Lady respond, or would her silence finally betray the image she'd built? One thing was clear. The rules of decorum had cracked, and what Melania didn't know is that Jasmine Crockett doesn't play by those old rules. For years, Melania Trump had built her empire not on words, but on silence. In Washington, silence could be sharper than any speech, more strategic than any policy. It was her shield, her signature, her statement. While others shouted into microphones and scrambled for relevance, she stood still, polished, poised, and unapproachable. When she first arrived on the political stage, the world struggled to define her. Was she complicit or trapped, shy or shrewd? To her supporters, Melania was mystery wrapped in marble, the woman who could glide past scandal and still look immaculate. To her critics, she was the ghost of privilege, floating above the chaos her husband stirred below. Her Be Best campaign had once been her chance to claim an identity of her own, a soft call for kindness in a cruel time. The posters showed her smiling gently beside school children, preaching civility in a nation tearing itself apart. But even that message, noble on paper, rang hollow against the noise of her husband's late-night rants and Twitter storms. The contrast became impossible to ignore. "How can you talk about kindness," one commentator asked, "when you share a roof with the man who turned cruelty into currency?" Melania never responded. She didn't need to. She had learned early that silence could mean many things: superiority, indifference, or even quiet rebellion. And as cameras followed her every move, she discovered that the less she said, the more people projected onto her. Some imagined sadness. Others saw strategy. Either way, the mystery worked. But mystery has a cost. Over time, her distance hardened into something else: detachment. She stopped seeing crowds as people and started seeing them as reflections. Supporters became props in her pageantry. Every gesture rehearsed, every smile rationed. The woman who once spoke 5 languages now spoke none that could be trusted. Her world was one of glass and gold, yet somehow utterly soundproof. Behind the scenes, aides whispered that she hated the spotlight, but feared the shadows more. She would rather be misinterpreted than forgotten. And so she stayed, beside a man who consumed oxygen like headlines, standing silent at his side, always immaculate, always half a step away from scandal but never untouched by it. She wore silence the way some wear perfume, invisible but intoxicating. It made her untouchable, even enviable. The American elite admired her composure, the way she could appear calm while the world burned around her. They called it grace, but to those who looked closer, it wasn't grace. It was armor, an armor forged from years of watching, enduring, pretending. Every snide joke about her accent, every cruel meme about her marriage, every whisper questioning her worth, she absorbed them all and built her wall higher. The woman who once seemed fragile had learned the cruelest truth. In politics, empathy is a liability, and so she retreated further, into curated perfection. The designer gowns, the cold smiles, the eyes that rarely revealed emotion. It was all part of her survival. She understood the performance of power better than most. Let others rage and reveal themselves. She would simply endure. Yet even perfection grows brittle when confronted by authenticity. And Melania, in all her composure, had never faced someone quite like Jasmine Crockett. Crockett didn't come from silk or spectacle. She didn't measure worth by lineage or luxury. Where Melania's world was choreographed, Crockett's was lived. And though they occupied the same stage now, they played by different scripts entirely. Melania didn't fear insults. She feared irrelevance. She had survived ridicule, scandal, and a presidency that turned her into a symbol. But what terrified her most wasn't hate. It was being forgotten. So when the cameras turned that night, when the question about respect and image hung in the air, something old stirred inside her. A spark of pride or maybe insecurity. She gave that polished answer not out of arrogance, but out of habit. The only way she knew to survive was to perform. But for the first time, the script failed her. Crockett didn't play along. She didn't shrink under the glare. She met it head-on, and in that moment, Melania felt something she hadn't felt in years: exposure. For the first time, silence didn't protect her. It betrayed her, and though the cameras captured only a flicker, a tiny break in her expression, it was enough to tell the truth. The armor had begun to strain under the weight of its own perfection, but tonight, her armor was about to crack. Long before her name trended, before microphones and marble halls, Jasmine Crockett learned what it meant to fight for breath in rooms not built for her. She was born into a world that didn't hand out advantages, it handed out expectations. Work twice as hard, speak half as loud, be grateful, even when you're overlooked. In law school, she was the one sitting in the back row, invisible until called on, and when she spoke, the air changed. Her professors didn't expect conviction from a voice like hers, soft at first, but sharpened by necessity. She wasn't born into confidence. She forged it. One humiliation, one late-night study session, one small victory at a time. When others went home, she stayed to read case law under flickering fluorescent light, her reflection merging with the pages, the only reminder that she existed in a system designed to erase her. Those years weren't glamorous. They were survival with purpose. After graduation, she didn't chase the corner office or the cushy partnership. She went home, to the neighborhoods that raised her, to the people who never got a lawyer's call back. She defended tenants against greedy landlords, teenagers against unfair charges, workers who'd been silenced by contracts they couldn't read. Every courtroom became a battleground for dignity. Her suits weren't designer, her shoes scuffed from long days walking courthouse halls. But when she spoke before a judge, even the stenographer paused to listen. There was something raw and unfiltered in her. Not arrogance, but authenticity. Reporters would later describe her as blunt. That wasn't quite right. Bluntness implies carelessness. Crockett's words cut because she aimed them carefully. She didn't shout to be heard. She spoke to be understood. And when she wasn't, she made sure they had to listen. What drove her wasn't fame or vanity or even rebellion. It was something deeper, a stubborn belief that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, still mattered. She'd seen what happened when good people stayed quiet. She'd watched elders dismissed for their accents, women ignored for their tone, children punished for their anger. The turning point came during one of her first big cases. A mother had been evicted from her apartment in the middle of winter. The landlord lied on the stand, confident she wouldn't challenge him. Jasmine's voice shook as she cross-examined him, not from fear but fury. Each question peeled back another layer of deceit until the truth stood naked before the court. When the gavel came down in her client's favor, she didn't smile, she exhaled. That was the day she understood power, not the kind you inherit, the kind you earn by refusing to yield. Still, it wasn't easy. Power in America doesn't welcome those who question its tone. For every victory, there was a backlash, whispers that she was too angry, too emotional, not polished enough. But Jasmine learned to turn those words into fuel. Every insult became another match against her resolve. Then came Congress. The cameras, the panels, the politics, none of it scared her. She'd fought tougher battles with no spotlight and no safety net. Washington was just another courtroom, larger and more performative. But it was the same fight, truth versus performance, substance versus spectacle, and across the aisle, she saw the spectacle embodied, perfectly manicured smiles, talking points rehearsed to sound sincere, power inherited like a family heirloom. It made her blood simmer, not with envy, but with recognition of what she refused to become. So when she stood in that ballroom across from Melania Trump, she didn't see glamour. She saw a mask. The glitter, the posture, the trained restraint. It reminded her of every person who'd once told her to stay in her place, to speak softer, to smile through insult. That night, Melania's condescending tone didn't sting. It confirmed something Jasmine had always known. The fight for respect is never over, but Jasmine had promised herself years ago that she would never again swallow her truth for anyone's comfort. She remembered the eviction mother crying in her arms, the girl expelled for talking back, the elderly man dismissed in court because his English wasn't perfect. All those voices, all those faces, they echoed in her chest when she looked into Melania's cool, practiced smile. Respect, she thought, isn't a privilege of the powerful. It's a right of the human, and that's why, when Melania's remark dripped with elegance and condescension, when the room waited for Crockett to flinch, to smile politely, to retreat, she didn't. She felt the same calm she did in the courtroom before delivering the question that exposed the lie. In that split second, her years of silence, struggle, and survival converged into one truth. Authenticity doesn't bow. The air in the ballroom thickened as Jasmine straightened her shoulders, eyes steady, heartbeat steady. For once, she wasn't just defending a client or a cause. She was defending the idea of realness itself. And when Melania tried to patronize her, Crockett's fire ignited. The chandeliers above the ballroom glowed like captured stars, their light glinting off sequins glass and guarded smiles. The night had resumed its rhythm, laughter in polite tones, champagne flowing, photographers circling like hawks. Yet beneath the glittering surface, something trembled. At the center of the room, Melania Trump stood poised, flawless, her expression sculpted into serenity. The comment exchange from earlier had shifted the air, too subtle for outsiders to notice, too sharp for insiders to ignore. She could feel eyes on her, waiting to see how she'd reclaim control of the narrative. She approached Jasmine Crockett with the grace of someone who'd mastered the choreography of civility. Her voice was soft, smooth, practiced, the kind of tone that could pass for kindness, depending on who was listening. "You know, Congresswoman," Melania said, tilting her head slightly, "I always say, in times like these, a little decorum goes a long way. Class, respect, and dignity. That is what makes leadership admired, not noise." The word noise floated like perfume, sweet, poisonous, unmistakable. For a beat, nothing moved. The string quartet at the far end played a tune too delicate for the tension it underscored. Crockett didn't flinch. Her wine glass remained still in her hand. But her eyes, calm, alert, unblinking, met Melania's, and something unspoken passed between them. Around them, guests feigned conversation but listened hungrily. A senator's wife whispered to her friend. A reporter angled his phone discreetly, recording. Everyone could feel the knife hidden behind the compliment. Melania smiled again, this time just enough to let superiority peek through the charm. "Of course I understand," she continued, "that for some passion can be misunderstood as disrespect. But true leaders learn when to speak and when to remain silent." It was the kind of line that sounded graceful in print, but in person it dripped with condescension. The crowd tensed. This wasn't about civility anymore. It was about hierarchy, a test of who would bow, who would break. Crockett's mind flickered, not with anger, but with precision. Every instinct told her this was the moment Washington waited for, the scene where the outspoken Congresswoman would finally be put in her place. She could play safe, smile it off, let the story die in the press tomorrow, or she could speak and risk everything to tell a truth that would echo far beyond this chandeliered cage. Her heartbeat slowed, not quickened. Years of courtroom battles had taught her control. Let the other side underestimate you. Let them think the silence means surrender. "Decorum," she said finally, her voice low, even, deliberate, "isn't silence. It's self-respect. There's a difference." Melania blinked. The smile held, but the temperature in the room dropped. Someone near the buffet gasped quietly. A camera flash went off. Once, Twice, like lightning warning of a coming storm. Crockett set her glass down on the table beside her, each motion precise, almost reverent. "I believe," she continued, "that leadership isn't about appearances, Mrs. Trump. It's about accountability."